just waiting to go. There we are, and we are live on Facebook and on YouTube with Parvin Dabas, your host of the MMA India show, and Chamatkar Sandhu, our man on the ground in Boston, covering UFC 220. And this stream is going to be going somewhere else special. We can't announce that right now, but it will. And you know, it's almost like we don't know where to start. You know, without any disrespect to the other fighters, everybody does only want to talk about two fights. You know, let's be very honest about that. There's two fights people want to speak about, you know, and that's what they want to talk about. Let's start with Daniel Cormier versus Volkan Oezdemir. You know, Daniel can take a lot of punishment. He took a lot of punishment initially, which was, he knew Volkan, that was going to be his game plan, but it didn't really affect him too much. He seemed to shake it off almost. You know, like he knew it was coming, and he shook it off a little. And just to let you guys know, Chamatkar is in the UFC media room, so that's why you can see everybody in the back over there, and still working on the media and UFC PR and everything. So great location for us today, and the post-fight conference just took place here as well. And you know, so tell me, what was your because you had a ringside octagon side seat as well.
Yeah, that's right. I was kind of posted backstage for the majority of the night, but luckily I was able to kind of get out cage side for the main event and the co-main event. You know, in regards to the co-main event, Daniel Cormier, you know, he came out and he pretty much did what, you know, I and many others, you know, expect him to do. He kind of weathered the early storm, took some of Volkan's best shots, which kind of still proves that Daniel's, you know, got a good chin on him. But ultimately, the wrestling was, you know, too much. You know, Volkan, you know, we spoke to him in the post-fight press conference, and he said that's going to be an area of improvement for him moving forward. And it was very interesting to see kind of Daniel, you know, speak about, you know, what this fight meant to him in regards to he was coming off the loss to John Jones, and for him, he was fighting for a vacant light heavyweight championship. But it was a good, solid performance. You know, there's levels to this, you know, and outside of John Jones, you know, Daniel Cormier is the greatest light heavyweight of all time. And it was just, you know, a textbook performance. I'm sure this will do great for Volkan moving forward. It was a great learning experience to be in there with a, you know, level of fighter and a caliber of fighter as Daniel Cormier. But I think it was just a little bit too much too soon for Volkan Oezdemir. And he's still young enough that, you know, I still feel like we're going to see him there or thereabouts in the coming years. But it wasn't his life tonight. It was DC's.
Yeah, and once he took him on the ground, he almost seemed to toy with him a bit. And even on their feet, DC showed a really amazing game. And like he said, listen, it's the American Kickboxing Academy. You know, you gotta learn, you gotta know how to box. And he showed he has really good skills. But he did show that against John Jones earlier as well. Even though he lost in that fight, he did show that he can stand and trade with the best. Even here, you know, his head movement was great. You know, he was getting in some good shots. Volkan immediately, I think, found out that he wasn't going to have it as easy standing up as he thought he would. And he really, he softened Volkan up really well on his feet before taking him down. And he did much, much better. And I don't think anybody expects DC to stand and trade as much as he does. And I think that's where people get a little, you know, taken aback. Especially somebody like a Volkan. And Volkan's whole game plan was, you know, he came out swinging, you know, in the first round, but it didn't seem to, you know, have the effect that he thought it would.
I know, and that goes to his nickname, No Time. You know, he likes to finish fights early and quick by knockout, and we've seen him do that. But like I said, you know, Daniel Cormier is just, you know, there's levels to this game, and he is top tier. He is top draw stuff when it comes to mixed martial arts. And like I said before, it was just a little bit too much for Volkan Oezdemir, a bit off a little bit more than he can chew. And what's interesting now, moving forward, is to see what happens with DC. You know, we've got this hearing with John Jones next month. Hopefully we'll get a resolution and find out how long he'll be suspended for. Jones ends up returning at some point in 2018, then I think the best thing to do for Daniel Cormier is just to wait for that John Jones fight. If John Jones gets a pretty lengthy suspension, and we're talking maybe 18 months, 2 years, then the question becomes, what do you do with DC? Who do you match him up against with? And a lot of fans still want to see an Alexander Gustafsson rematch tonight. And we're going to get to the main event, shortly. But Dana White came out and said he was pretty interested in seeing Daniel Cormier go up to heavyweight and challenge Stipe Miocic for the heavyweight championship. And this is something that I've been pressing DC on for quite some time now. I asked him at the press conference back in Vegas. I asked him this week during the open workouts and the media scrums. And, he's not 100% committing to the idea just yet. But needless to say, that's definitely one of the biggest kind of marquee and money fights you could probably put on this year. And if Daniel Cormier does do that, he would almost be in a very selective group of fighters who have been able to hold championships in 2 different weight classes. In the press conference, however, he shied away from that and instead put over Cain Velasquez. And he wants Cain to come back and hopefully challenge for the championship at some point this year. So for the time being, I think he's taken a fire extinguisher and put the fire out on any idea of him going to heavyweight, and instead putting a platform in place for Cain Velasquez to come back and hopefully challenge the title this year.
And if we know anything about Daniel, what we do know is he's loyal. He's a family man. He showed how much it means that his son, sees what he does and understand that there are going to be wins, there are going to be losses, and it's great to see that kind of loyalty to his family, and his team as well. That perhaps the only reason he wouldn't want to go up is because his own teammate Cain Velasquez is waiting in the wings, coming for that title shot, so to speak. And I think Daniel is, I think, getting that, I don't know what the word is, but people are starting to understand and respect and like him much more because of this. Because before, you felt at a couple of these press conferences, he used to be booed, and he used to wonder, why the hell am I being booed when I'm such a straight up guy? And people, I think, just like bad guys sometimes. They used to like John Jones because he used to be, for lack of a better word, such a smartass. Whereas Daniel is a straight up, guy who will have your back and who has a lot of integrity. Not to say John Jones was, but I think it's taken people time to understand what kind of a champion Daniel Cormier is. And now that they are understanding, I think there's a lot more respect for him as a champion and as a person than there was before. Whoops, we lost Chamatkar there, so we're just gonna dial it back.
I'm back.
There, great. Okay, so we lost you just for a second, but you heard what I said till the end there. That's where I finished anyway.
Can you just give me the last 30 seconds again?
Well, basically I said now people understand and respect him much more now that they see how he is as a person and his loyalty to his family and friends and team.
Absolutely. In the post-fight interview with Joe Rogan, he's talking about Cain Velasquez, he's talking about Khabib Nurmagomedov. He's putting them over in interviews and social media. He is the team captain of AKA. I kind of jokingly asked him in the post-fight press conference, what about Luke Rockhold, who's been absent from AKA and, set up there with Henry Hooft and the guys in South Florida. But in essence, it was just because Khabib was here and Cain was here, and they were front of mind for DC, which is why he kind of gave it a shout out in the post-fight press conference and the post-fight interview with Joe Rogan. But 100% Luke Rockhold is definitely part of the team. And it was really cool to see Arjun Singh Bulla here. Arjun was in town this weekend to support DC, and I think there was something like 47 folks that DC had flown in, or 47 folks in total that had flown in to support Cormier for this title defense. You can tell, he's a family man. He loves the camaraderie of his team. He loves to be the captain of the team, and he's exemplary in everything he does when it comes to, when you think about leadership, and you look up the word leader in the dictionary, you should see a face of Daniel Cormier right next to it.
I totally agree. Now, Tamanpreet is asking, do you think the light heavyweight division is a shallow division?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, if you're comparing it to other divisions like lightweight or welterweight or featherweight at the moment, 100% it is. And that's why you've got the UFC president Dana White coming out and saying, hey, look, Daniel Cormier versus Stipe Miocic is a fight that makes sense for him, and a fight that he's interested in. There isn't kind of like a clear-cut next logical contender for Daniel Cormier. He's beaten everybody except John Jones, and we don't have answers to how long of a suspension, if a suspension at all, John Jones will receive. We're going to find that out next month, which is fine because we found out in the post-fight press conference that Daniel Cormier has injured his hand or his thumb, so he's going to be out a while anyway. So he's going to take about a month off, and hopefully during that month period we'll find out what's going to happen with John Jones. I personally, I would love to see Daniel Cormier go up to heavyweight. I would love to see a fight Stipe Miocic. I would love to see an attempt to be just the 5th fighter in UFC history, be able to claim to be a 2-weight champion. And in his case, he couldn't even defend both the light heavyweight and heavyweight titles, because you can have time, you can let the light heavyweight division breathe for a bit, and then a logical contender will present itself while you defend a heavyweight championship and vice versa. I think you can simultaneously defend both if you choose to do so. But again, going back to what he said, he's really putting Cain Velasquez ahead of himself when it comes to any talk of fighting for the heavyweight championships.
Yeah, and I think that's the way it's going to be. So any other talk is all I don't really see him go up to heavyweight because of what he said. So now Nitin is asking, did people finally see holes in the challengers game? Now let's keep that question right now for Volkan Oezdemir, because we will move up to the next main event fight then to talk about that. But were there holes in Volkan's? Obviously there were, but do you think he needs to really go back, introspect, and realize that he's not going to get to the top just with a very good stand-up game?
Yeah, and again, we asked him about that at the post-fight press conference, and he made it very clear that he's going to go and work on his wrestling, no doubt about it, but he's not going to just disregard what's got him to the dance. He's got knockout power, he's got great boxing, he's got great kickboxing. He's a mixed martial artist, he's going to work on everything, right? Striking, jiu-jitsu, grappling, wrestling. But I'm sure, wrestling is going to have to become a big focus. If he's going to get back up into a title shot picture with the likes of Daniel Cormier, takedown defense is critical, and being able to handle yourself and know what to do when you've got, an Olympic level wrestler on top of you, you need answers for that. And to get answers, you need to start training for it and start training with the right folks who can actually prepare you for someone like DC.
Yeah. Well, all due respect to both DC and Volkan. Now, moving on, of course, to the main event. Stipe, of course, did show he had a lot of cards up his sleeve, and he fought such a smart game. I mean, he stayed just out of distance, and you can hear his coaches keep telling him as well, don't get into mid-range, which was, he stayed just out of range. When he got the opportunity, he got some really good counter strikes. He took Francis down, and he just wore him out totally. I mean, of course, Stipe did get tired as well, but even then, is he going to make a comeback with that one-hit power that everybody thinks he has? But he wasn't able to do that, but he showed that he does, and he did show that there are a lot of things, of course, that he needs to learn and come back with as well. And Stipe showed that it's not just power that counts, but you need to be smart. And they had obviously done a lot of homework on how to fight Francis Ngannou, the Predator, how to stay out of his range, how to tire him out, take him down. And he fought that to a T. Of course, he was going to take some damage. You know, you're not going to go in and fight, you know, the number one heavyweight contender and not take any damage. You could see the damage he took in the post-fight press con, and that was just from one hit, like he said. But like we said, you know, he played a he fought a really smart game, and he just wore Francis down. What's your viewpoint from the octagon, the ringside seat you had?
Yeah, again, you know, very lucky I was able to get out there cage side for the main event. The atmosphere was electric. We were all kind of just like, you know, sitting on the edge of our seats waiting to see how this first round would play out. And, you know, Francis came out all guns blazing. It was amazing to see Stipe Miocic just duck and weave and move out of the way of some deadly blows that Francis was throwing. And some of these strikes were just inches away from landing on Stipe's head or chin. And had those landed, maybe we would be talking about a completely different situation right now. But that being said, Stipe kind of, you know, weathered the early storm, obviously wrestling and battling, taking Francis down many, many times throughout the 5 rounds, and just kind of like weighing on him, pummeling him, punching him. I don't think there's any point where I thought, you know, he would land maybe perhaps a knockout blow on the ground. You know, Francis is a big guy. You know, I think he's got a pretty good chin. And as the longer the fight went on, there wasn't too much meat behind the punches that were being thrown from either fight, to be honest. It was kind of like, you know, really tit-and-tatter punches that Stipe was kind of throwing. And Francis at one point, literally, his hand is so big, he was going to put his hand in front of his face to protect his face from the blows that he was throwing. But that being said, it was a very one-sided fight. You know, over the course of the 5 rounds, Stipe did way more than enough to get the unanimous decision. And now he's broken the record. Stipe Miocic has defended UFC heavyweight championship 3 times consecutively, something that no other UFC heavyweight champion has done in the past. And then, you know, that, you know, begs the question: is he the greatest of all time? Some folks online seem to think he is. Some people want to categorize him as perhaps maybe the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time, and not perhaps the greatest heavyweight in MMA history. That is very debatable. But it's, you know, hard for Stipe Miocic out of that conversation now. And you know, it was a solid performance. It almost felt like a home game for him here in Boston. The crowd were really behind him. Not like Cleveland, they weren't as loud and as passionate as a Cleveland crowd, obviously, but it was a ferocious crowd here tonight. And, you know, Stipe's gone through a murderer's row of heavyweights, you know, both in the run-up to getting a title shot and then since when he's and defending it. So all respect to Stipe Miocic.
Definitely. Now, having said that, does he have to go through Cain Velasquez and beat him to actually be called the greatest of all time?
I guess, I mean, you know, that question is always so subjective, you know. Even if he beats, you know, a Cain Velasquez, or if he, say, he fights, you know, Fabrizio Verdum and beats him, you know, some people might call him the greatest of all time, and they still have some people say, oh, you know, he didn't go on this long run like Fedor, you know, beating heavyweights for so many years. This is up to you, your opinion. It is up to you to debate that. But I think it's fair to say, you know, when it comes to UFC heavyweight champions, he's the best. You know, he broke the record. He's done something that nobody else has done before. And who knows how long this streak can go? 4 title defenses, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, you know, Stipe Miocic, you know, he's the elite of the elite. He's beating the best. He comes in with good game plans. He executes them really, really well. He's got a good team behind him. And it's still fascinating to me that he's still a part-time firefighter.
Yeah. And there's Ariel right behind you. But,
yes.
yeah. So, great. We have... So, like I was saying, what do you think is next for both fighters now? For Daniel Cormier and for Stipe Miocic and for the guys who need to come back, Francis Ngannou and Volkan. What do you think is the next fight to make for all 4 of them?
Well, that's a good question. Well, Stipe Miocic, again, I told you, I personally would love to see him fight Daniel Cormier. I think you match those 2 up, so I guess that puts those 2 out of the equation right away. With Volkan, that's a good question. That's a very good question. I suppose you could give him some time off. You build him back up again. I don't know, maybe like a Corey Anderson, maybe. You know, top 10 light heavyweight. Maybe later on this year, maybe in the summer, early autumn. With Francis Ngannou, you know what? I would love to see that Derek Lewis fight. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, you know, that's a fight that's been talked about for quite some time. You know, I think it'll be an entertaining fight. I think they'll both bring a lot of, you know, heat to the table, so to speak, both, you know, in and out of the octagon. So yeah, there you go. There's my picks on what I think he should be doing next, or what the UFC should be doing next with all 4 fighters.
Of course, you know, in the heavyweight, I think there are a lot of options for Francis Ngannou. A lot of guys who do want to come back and become #1 contender, like a Junior Santos, of course, like a Cain Velasquez. Will Cain Velasquez get the title shot directly, or will he have to go through somebody like a you know, like a Francis Ngannou or Derek Lewis? So I think there's a lot of matchups, really good matchups to be made there. In the light heavyweight division, of course, there's Alexander Gustafsson also waiting there in the wings, as well as a John Jones, who could come back anytime, depending on how that whole case plays out. You know, even an Alexander Gustafsson, you know, could directly fight for the title, or will they put him up against a John Jones or against a Volkan Oezdemir? You know, remains to be seen. But these are all really good matchups, and any of them would be really good for the division and to keep things really interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Again, if DC doesn't fight Stipe Miocic for whatever reason, if he doesn't fight John Jones because John Jones is going to get a 2-year suspension for whatever reason, I personally then would love to see Daniel Cormier and Alexander Gustafsson Part 2. The first fight was an absolute classic, easily the second best light heavyweight title fight of all time, right behind John Jones. So let's do it again. I'm all on board for DC versus Gustafsson, you know, if he's going to stay at light heavyweight.
Yeah. Now, before we go, let's just see if there's any unanswered questions. Sumaid Balan asked, what's the next challenge for the baddest man on the planet? We already gave him that. And now, of course, this is something that I think, was it you who asked Stipe about, no, that was, I think, somebody else who asked him very point blank whether he was happy with the push that the UFC had been giving him and Dana, and you know, what he was going to do about it now. So that's what Sumaid Balan is asking. Is it time for Dana to give a bigger push in marketing strength behind the record-breaking champ Stipe?
Yeah, you would like to think so, right? It'll be interesting to see how he's promoted now moving forward. You know, he's a record breaker. You know, you look at the list of fighters that he's fought and defended his championship belt against. Personally, if I'm the UFC, I'm putting Stipe back in Cleveland. Take him home. You know, I thought the promotion around being the Cleveland guy, the Ohio guy, worked so well for him. Just having, like, you know, the other big franchise teams like the Cavaliers behind him, and the fire department, and just the Cleveland, you know, community really get behind Stipe Miocic. So you know, it's not rocket science. You know, how to promote Stipe is to keep him in Cleveland as many times as you can. So that's what I'd be doing if I was the UFC.
Yeah. Now, Tamanpreet also asks, where did it go? Dan, there's some news about Dana asking. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that we already answered about the DC Stipe fight. I thought that was a different question. So we've got all these questions. More or less, we've answered all of them. So sorry, guys, if we've not taken your name. We've answered more or less during the course of the conversation. We've answered your questions. Now, my last, of course, point to bring up, how would you define UFC 220, since you were there from the beginning, from the open workouts, media scrum? You had a lot of time to talk to everybody. You know, the fight itself, of course, there was a lot of criticism for the rest of the fights, except for the co-main event and the main event, which of course did make up. But how would you categorize this card overall, you know, in hindsight, now that it's finished?
Well, I thought it was a good event for the Boston crowd. Like, you know, all the local guys won tonight, which is great because the fans get, you know, really behind that. Obviously, it was a very top-heavy card. It was all about the two title fights, the main and co-main event. And I thought that Daniel Cormier, first of all, delivered. He kind of did what we were expecting him to do, but he still weathered that early storm. And you know, the fans got behind DC. It was great to see that. And with regards to the main event, that first round alone, I thought was probably worth the value of folks that paid $60 for the pay-per-view or watching around the world. That first round was just so interesting in terms of how it played out. Were we going to see a first round knockout like many were predicting? And like I said, it had me on the edge of my seat the entire time. And it was only until you started to see Ngannou slow down throughout the course of the fight where you started to see the fight slip away from him and Miocic just implement his game plan and his strategy, just wrestling him and battling with him and pummeling him on the ground. But overall, like I said, the crowd were awesome. The guys that they, I suppose, were backing to win did win, which obviously always creates a good environment and atmosphere in the arena. And we got a couple of awesome knockouts too. So I think all round was a pretty good card.
Great. And like we mentioned before, fortunately, there are no PPVs in India. We get the live streams from Sony, ESPN, both the PPVs and Fight Night. So lucky us. We're not shelling out 60 bucks. You know, that's our Desi blood. No fucking way. And it's good that everybody realizes that. But we're very loyal fans, and MMA is coming up in a huge way in the country. And we're so glad at MMA India to be at the forefront.